Hello, everybody, and welcome to Theology 101. Today we are going to look at the book of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel is the ninth book of the Hebrew Bible and the third book of the former prophets. The former prophets consists of four historical books: Joshua, Judges, Samuel, and Kings. 1st and 2nd Samuel were not originally divided into two books, but were one. However, the Septuagint, which is a Greek translation of the Old Testament from the 3rd century BC, separated Samuel into two books, which is why we have 1st and 2nd Samuel today. 1st and 2nd Samuel gets its name from the prophet Samuel, who helped transition Israel from the time of the judges to kings. Samuel is the main character in 1 Samuel, while 2 Samuel focuses on King David. Even though Samuel is the main character of 1 Samuel, he is not the author of 1 and 2 Samuel. Why? Because Samuel's death is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 25, verse 1. Now Samuel died, and all Israel assembled and mourned for him, and they buried him in his house at Ramah. Samuel's death happened before David became king, which means he could not have been the author of 2 Samuel. So the question is this: who is the author of 1 and 2 Samuel? Based on 1 Chronicles chapter 29, verse 29, it has been suggested that Samuel put together the early narratives of 1 Samuel, and then an editor later finished the rest of the book. Although we don't know who the author is, we know that he compiled the book after the death of Solomon and the division of the kingdom in 930 BC. Now, what is the purpose of 1st and 2nd Samuel? 1st and 2nd Samuel highlights the relationship between kingship and covenant. When Samuel instituted the office of king within Israel, he did so with the concept of God's covenant. Saul obviously failed to live up to God's covenant, while David did. David was an imperfect but true representation of the picture of a king living under God's covenant, which ultimately points to Jesus, who is a perfect picture of a covenantal king. With this purpose in mind, let me give you an overview of 1 Samuel. This book opens with Samuel's birth. His mother Hannah was barren and prayed for a son. When God gave her a son, she named her Samuel, which sounds like the Hebrew phrase, heard of God. Hannah dedicated Samuel to God, and Eli, the priest at the tabernacle, raised him. Eli's sons were described as evil, which is why Eli focused on Samuel to grow up to become a righteous servant of God. Later, in a battle with the Philistines, the Israelites were defeated and the Ark of the Covenant was taken. During this battle, Eli's two sons, Hophni and Phinehas, were killed. When Eli heard this news, he collapsed and died. The Philistines placed the Ark of the Covenant in the temple of their god, Dagon. However, the idol of Dagon fell and broke into pieces. Then a plague broke out, causing the Ark to be moved around and eventually returning to Israel. Through this divine intervention, God was showing the Philistines that their victory over Israel could not be credited to their god, Dagon. 20 years pass, and Samuel promises Israel that they will be delivered from Philistine oppression if they confess their sin and turn away from their idols. When Samuel gathered Israel together, the Philistines attacked. However, God intervened with a loud sound, which confused the Philistines, showing that if Israel obeyed God's covenant, that he would protect them from other nations. When Samuel was old, the leaders within Israel approached him to appoint a king so that they can be like the other nations. Samuel knew that their request for a human king was a rejection of God as their king. God tells Samuel to give Israel a king, but to also warn them about what they are requesting. Samuel begins to search for Israel's first king and meets Saul, who is looking for his father's lost donkeys. God told Samuel the day before that he will meet Saul and to anoint him as Israel's first king. So after meeting Saul, Samuel privately anoints Saul as king. In 1 Samuel chapter 11, Saul leads Israel to victory over the Ammonites, which gives another seal of approval on his selection to be king. Saul credited God for his victory. However, beginning in 1 Samuel chapter 13, we see Saul's disobedience on full display. When Saul was threatened by the Philistines, he initially waited for Samuel as he was previously instructed. However, when it seemed that Samuel might not make it on time, Saul became impatient and offered a sacrifice himself. Another time, when Saul's son, Jonathan, attacked the Philistines, Saul thought about joining forces and concluded that waiting for God's word will hurt his chances to win. Instead of waiting for God, he trusted his own instincts. Then in 1 Samuel chapter 15, Saul was commanded by Samuel to attack the Amalekites and destroy them and to not spare any humans or animals. Saul disobeyed this command by keeping the best animals. This is when God sent Samuel to officially reject Saul as king. Beginning in 1 Samuel chapter 16, we are introduced to to David. The Lord told Samuel to go to Jesse's house in Bethlehem to anoint one of his sons as king to replace Saul. We see that God had chosen David, Jesse's youngest son, and Samuel anointed him as king. Later, the Philistines, led by the giant Goliath, challenges Israel to fight. Nobody accepts the challenge until David, who was visiting the camp to bring food to his brothers, heard the challenge and stepped up. God helped David defeat Goliath, and afterwards, Saul's son, Jonathan, pledged loyalty to David. As David achieved further success, Saul began to fear that David was a threat to his throne. Saul started to hate David and tried to kill him several times, forcing David to run away. Later, Jonathan met with David to warn him of Saul and to say goodbye. During this meeting, both knew that David and not Jonathan will be the next king of Israel. So David went to Ahimelech, a priest in Nob, saying that he was on a secret mission for Saul. He asked for bread and the sword of Goliath. However, one of Saul's servants saw what happened, so David had to run away. The servant who saw David reported to Saul how Ahimelech helped David, so Saul killed all the priests at Nob except for Abiathar, who escaped and joined David. Meanwhile, David and his men delivered the citizens of Keilah from the Philistines, but were forced to leave the city when the citizens were about to betray David and hand him over to Saul. While hiding deep in a cave at En-Gedi, David had the opportunity to kill Saul, but he decided not to. Instead, David cut off a piece of Saul's robe and left it near Saul to let him know that he showed mercy to him that day. Then in 1 Samuel chapter 25, Samuel dies, and David meets an evil shepherd named Nabal. David was mistreated by him, but does not retaliate because of the words of Nabal's wife, Abigail. Shortly after this incident, Nabal died, and David took Abigail as his wife. Later, David has another chance to kill Saul. Instead, David takes Saul's spear and water jug and returns the next day to return the spear to Saul and to tell him he will never hurt him since he is God's anointed one. David becomes tired of hiding from Saul, so he goes to Philistia to get far away from him. David gains the trust of Achish, a Philistine ruler, and was given the town of Ziklag as a place for him to live. From Ziklag, David raided several tribes in southern Philistia, but tricked Achish, saying he was raiding parts of Judah. As the Philistines gathered an army to fight Israel, Saul was afraid and went to a witch at Endor to bring up the spirit of Samuel. Saul was told by the spirit that Israel will be defeated and that he and his sons will die in the upcoming battle. Although Achish desired David to join the Philistine army, the other Philistine commanders did not trust him. This turn of events rescued David from a serious dilemma created by his friendship with Achish, but continued allegiance to Israel. Later, David discovered while he was away from his city Ziklag, it was raided by the Amalekites and their wives, including David's 2 wives, children, and cattle were captured. David and his men looked for the Amalekites and recovered all that had been taken and even more. And so David then divided the plunder amongst his troops and sent gifts from it to various towns in Judah. In the final chapter of 1 Samuel, we see that Israel's battle with the Philistines ended with Saul taking his own life, along with Jonathan and 2 other sons of Saul being killed. What happens next is what we will cover in 2 Samuel. Thank you to today's sponsor, On Reverence. They offer a free digital worship music app called Maskill. If you want to find out more, I'll leave some links below in the description box. If you missed the last video about the book of Ruth, I'll leave a link here for you to watch. Until next time, see you.